Good afternoon. We are in Perugia for the world. I think that maybe we could do this session in Spanish. But no, we will respect the convention and we will try our best English to be, to comply with our commitment and to the fact that this is an international journalist festival. We are happy to be here. I would like to start with a quote of the speech given by our founder, Gabriel García Márquez, when he received the Nobel Award 42 years ago. He said in Stockholm, "A reality not of paper, but one that lives within us and determines each instant of our countless daily deaths, and that sustains the source of the insatiable creativity, full of sorrow and beauty, of which this roving and nostalgic Colombia or Latin America is but one cipher more singled out by fortune." The Fundación Gabo, which I am the co-founder and director, was created by Gabriel García Márquez 30 years ago. And we have had contact, we have trained, we have organized festivals, and we have really lived with thousands of Latin American and Spanish and Portuguese journalists. And I have to say that in this complicated continent that is Latin America, especially Central America and parts of South America, we really each day find that is an admirable source of creativity in this journalism, despite all the odds, all the problems, all the challenges that our colleagues have to face daily. We in Latin America are not full democracies, but we have in different degrees democratic systems. And we also have seen how countries lose democracy and see how authoritarian leaders or regimes are installed. And I would say that maybe we have lessons to share with the rest of the world, especially a country that we all know is now subject to a very clear take of power by authoritarian leaders. And you know that we are talking about the United States of America. I hope that our American friends will open wide their eyes to see what is really happening there. And in the case of journalists here in Latin America, as the title of this session says, is a journalist that has learned to stand up, to resist. And we have three cases that I know very well. One of Venezuela, Luzmeli Reyes, founder and CEO of Efecto Cucuyo. I met her so many years ago, I would say more 22 years ago, when she was in Últimas Noticias. Laura Ardila, and she has also received so many awards and prizes. We all respect La Maestra Luzmeli. Laura from Colombia, I met her also many years ago when she started to be in our workshops, and she became a very important investigative journalist in our country. And now she is in a condition of being by her decision exiled to avoid certain problems that she will tell us. It's the same case of Luz Meli. Efecto Cocuyo is operating in Venezuela, but she's now in the United States. And finally, Jose Zamora. Jose is communicator. He is from Guatemala. He is an expert in communication, but he's also, he represents a person that we all admire and that we are each day, preoccupied by his situation, a real hero of Latin American journalists, that is Jose Chepe Zamora, his father, and he has been along the years with his father, the founder of El Periódico, fighting not only for the personal freedom of him, but for the freedom of the press in Guatemala, that is a country in transition. Let's talk with them. Let's start with Luz Meli. And I would say that maybe Venezuela is the case more hard, more complicated now. But at the same time, I always admire how do you go on with a certain joy, certain style, despite the problem of each day, the pressure of the government is growing against journalism. But you keep the flame, and you are doing your job with your colleagues, and you recently are out. But tell us how is to live, to convive with such regime in a country like Venezuela.
Well, good afternoon. I always say, and some people here know this expression, that I am smarter in Spanish than in English, but I try to do my best speaking in English. So I would like to share part of the experience to do journalism in Venezuela, and something that I admire for my colleagues that they are on the ground is that no matter what is happening in Venezuela, which is as you described before, we are this commitment to do journalism. And why we are so connecting or so linked with journalism, I think that it's because some of us grow on democracy. And having this sense of liberty or freedom make you feel more responsible about the way that you are going to support the next generation. So for me and for my colleagues and my partners in Venezuela, I think that we are very attached to our new generations and what we are going to do with them, how we can support. Because something that I always repeat is I did my career in Venezuela as a journalist in a free country. Mm-hmm. Many of our young journalists don't have that opportunity. So what we try to do is try to show not as a sample, but try to show how we can be persistent and resist and insist doing journalism. It is not a slogan, it's a way to live.
I remember that Venezuela was not a paradise, and Chavez arrived saying that it was a corrupt democracy and he would clean and he would change things. But very soon, the regime started to close, and this is like a drop by drop. Each day, things are more and more harder, and but at the same times, we have seen how they bought the media through their people. But there is a lot of journalists. Today, the big media is co-opted, but the digital environment is full of very interesting initiatives. How is this coexistence?
Well, I think that I always try to bring to the conversation the year 2014, 2015, because at that moment, a lot of journalists, we decide that if we want to continue doing journalism in which we believe, we have to create our spaces. Here, there's my maestra and entrepreneur, Janine, and she always say that if you want a house, you have to build your house. So many journalists in Venezuela, we did build our house because we see the people, we see the soldiers, we see the people from government open the doors of our house, our homes, then all newspaper, all newsroom, and take it or by force or like throwing grenades in order to dismantle the newsroom. Now we don't have this big newsroom in Venezuela, but we now have a lot of journalists trying to connect in different newsroom, in different space. Somebody Daniel said to me this afternoon, that in Venezuela was, I'm going to try to say in English, was like when somebody went to the place where are the ants, you know? Yes. Oh, okay.
El hormiguero.
El hormiguero. And then they try, to close the hormiguero, and all the ants spread around the hormiguero, and we made little hormigueros. So I think that this metaphor is explain what is happening in Venezuela, and it's still happening in Venezuela, because now we try to connect different hormigueros, different ants with different interests, trying to make alliance in order to support each other, in order to bring people who are overseas, as a me, that now I am not living in Venezuela, but connecting with people who is on the ground.
Venezuela is ruled by the Socialist Party of Venezuela. It's a leftist regime. It's a very different case to Guatemala. In Guatemala, Guatemala has had civil war. Guatemala has had peace process. They tried to do the reform of the land ownership, and it was destroyed by the oligarchy. And today is a country that is really trying to transit to recover democracy, but there are cases like Chepe Zamora, the founder and director of El Periódico, a real independent newspaper with a lot of investigative journalism, that he has been, he has been jailed, he went out. We all asked him to go to exile and to keep the fight out of his country, but he said, no, I prefer to stay here, and he recently was jailed again. What has happened? Why is this happening in your country? How do you explain? You have center-left president, but at the same time there is a lot of, a network of corruption, of organized crime, of oligarchy that has real power. How is that?
It's thank you, Jaime. It's very complex. What's interesting is that all of these actors, it doesn't matter if they are from the right or the left. What they have in common is that they are abusive and authoritarian. And they use a flag or an ideology to get to power, but once they are in power, they are simply authoritarian. And and they become very repressive. And that's what we've seen. And they also use a handbook, right? And they do play by play the same thing. And in Guatemala, what happened is that there's a big, we call it the Pact of the Corrupt. So there were corrupt actors in every sector, and they became allies, and they took over the General Attorney's Office, and they have some judges in the judiciary that work with them. So they started using criminal law to persecute journalists and anybody who had anything to do with fighting corruption in the country. And that's exactly what happened with my father. Like, my father and his team were working together for over 27 years. They published the largest investigations into corruption. And during the last administration, during the first 144 weeks of the administration, El Periódico published 144 investigations into the administration's corruption. And that led to this criminalization. Today, my father has been arbitrarily detained for 987 days, only for denouncing corruption. And his imprisonment it was a punishment to him, because he really bothers power. But it was more than him and shutting down the newspaper. What they really wanted to do is send a message to all journalists in the country that they can go after anybody. So it's an attack against the freedom of the press.
Yes, there are similarities because despite of the type of political party, kleptocracy and corruption are clearly present in Venezuela and Guatemala. But in the case of Guatemala, they has been harsh, trying to punish the independent journalism of Chepe Zamora, and they had an achievement. You have to close the newspaper, but at the same time, Zamora, that belongs to the elite of Guatemala, is today a symbol of thriving, interesting journalism in your country, with a lot of communitarian type of media. And they are always, saying what has been to say, and they all are behind your father, and is a symbol of resistance against corruption in your country.
I think that's right. There's two important things. One is that my father said to me the other day, and I think he also said it publicly, that he sees his imprisonment as part of his job as a journalist, and that it allowed him, like these last 2 years, allowed him to expose the system and the abuse and the corruption more than his 30-year-long career in journalism. The other thing that it's very powerful, and I admire them so much, is that since he was in prison, there's really this strong message and attack and threat to journalists in the country. But despite the environment and the fear, because journalists feel that fear, they continue to do the job, and they continue to do more and better journalism, which is what I think is key, to continue doing the job. And in doing that, they've done more journalism, better journalism. They've done more collaborations, and there's a lot of solidarity. So that's it gives you a lot of hope, because you do see the journalists continue to do their job.
Laura comes from Cartagena. We are based in Cartagena. Laura have worked a lot in Barranquilla. That is my home city, and I really, we are from Colombia. Colombia is a very complex country. We have, we have to say, we have limitations in our democratic system, but we have elections. We have seen that, for instance, the current government is a left-leaning government after 180 years of white males of the conservative side of the society ruling our country. Now we have an ex-guerrilla member. And the problem of Colombia is a mix of corruption, of organized crime, and political violence that is being historic. But there investigative journalists, and Laura is one of the most important journalists doing this kind of exposition of the system of corruption in our country. Why don't you share your experience and the way how do you explain what is happening in Colombia to feel that maybe, we should have hope, but at the same time you have decided to go out under the protection of the Reporteros Sin Fronteras España. Let's share with the people here your case.
Okay, well, as Jaime said, I am from the Caribbean coast of Colombia. I have specialized in tell stories about how electoral corruption and politics work. Colombia is quite a unique country. Among other things, is highly centralized. The press and the national government almost always focus on what happens in the capital, Bogota, which has 1 million inhabitants, while the rest of the regions has like 50 million. And this is important because many of the issues that attack democracy in Colombia originate in the regions. I have specialized in telling these stories, especially the crime of vote buying through clans and political machines, which often steal public money to buy these votes in
and
elections.
are very popular.
And
Some
are
of
very
them.
popular, yes. So in 2015, I was living in Bogota, working in an independent media outlet called La Silla Vacía, the empty chair. When I decided to move back to my region to report on what was happening with politics there. And from the very beginning, my work faced pressure, intimidation. For example, on one time, men on motorcycles surround me in the street and stole my notebooks. Also, my boss at La Silla Vacía used to receive calls from friends of important politicians who badly spoke about my job. She always supported me, by the way, and that was the key for me, for my job. And with her support, in 2020, I decided to write a book about the history of the most important political clan in Colombia, and a family named Char. They are based in Barranquilla, which is the largest city in the Caribbean coast. They are in control of everything there, not only politically, but also economically since 2008. They are in control in Barranquilla, the family Char, the Char family. And they have allies in Congress, they support presidential candidates. And I wrote about the complex combination they make of politics, business, and crimes, such as vote buying. And
propaganda.
Propaganda, and I wrote about their relationship with people linked to drug trafficking. And I signed a contract with the largest Spanish-speaking publisher, Planeta, Editorial Planeta. And I wrote the book. It was difficult for me not to have too much access to public information, but I did it. I wrote the book. In 2023, when the book was ready to be delayed, the publisher refused to publish it without any giving clear explanation. In a short meeting, they say that they were afraid of legal action from these clans. But by my decision, the book had a legal edition made by an organization of lawyers that defends freedom of expression. And after that, I decided to tell this story in an article in the newspaper El Espectador. And later on, many people and several organizations protested against what they considered a censorship attempt. And I call it that the chorus in another article, because it was a chorus of voices that united. Nearly 100 of writers and artists from Colombia sent a letter to this publisher lamenting the censorship. Also, the publisher, the editorial directors resigned in protest, and other writers refused to continue to publishing their books there. And because the efforts of all these people and these organizations, my book finally was published by an independent small publisher called Rey Naranjo and became a bestseller. But sadly, after that, a smear campaign against me was activated in social media. It was a kind of violence with a strong gender component. From hundreds of accounts, they call me a bitch. They say that I was in love with these politicians. They say that my book was gossip. And after that, I received 2 threats from these accounts too. One of these threats say that not even God will save me in Barranquilla. So that's why I decided to go to Spain as part of a program for at-risk journalists, Latin American journalists run by Reporters Without Borders, or Reporteros Sin Fronteras, and Miguel Hernández University in Alicante.
It's interesting how there are several strong popular politicians creating this system of limitation of freedom. It's similar the case now in El Salvador with this president that has 90% of popularity, but freedom of the press in El Salvador is each day more and more reduced. And we are seeing also in Latin America how there are cyber attacks, you know, a lot of harassment through the social media, judiciaries, you know, the processes, etc. And in certain cases, imprisoned. You were telling me about a journalist that yesterday, a 20-year-old journalist, a young one, she was in prison, I don't know why. So how do you, but at the same time, resistance is alive and people keeps doing journalism. And how do you envision the things that are coming? Do you have, let's say, what are the lessons of this situation? And it's a situation that you can find also in Africa, some certain countries of Africa or in Asia, and maybe in the future there were more and more pressure against independent journalism. How do you think that we will tackle this this reality?
Well, me?
Eh?
I like to believe that in difficult times, good journalism grows stronger, no? And proof of that are, I don't know, in countries like El Salvador, Venezuela, Guatemala, Nicaragua, we are seeing examples of the best journalism, not only in Latin America, but also in the world.
Yes. But there are cases like Nicaragua that today is totally exiled.
There is, and there is no...
I think we have Carlos Fernando Chamorro here, and maybe we will ask him to say something about his country. Is the most extreme case, even more than maybe than Cuba, because repression is 100% in Nicaragua.
We keep working, and we can do nothing but continuing our jobs.
Luz Meli.
Keep walking and drinking whiskey. I think so. I always say that the vaccine against all the threats is doing best and better journalism. It's our mantra. But I would like to shed light about something that you mentioned. Is the cases of people who have to leave the countries. As you say, I'm sorry, I'm really sorry to hear about your situation, and I hope that everything will be better. And the situation of your father, the situation of many journalists in the world, but I don't want to refer about the world, but about our Latin America, because these trends, we know the trends 25 years ago, and we always share the situation in Venezuela, but people don't believe us. People always say that, oh, perhaps you are for the right, or this kind of thing, stupid things that sometimes emerge in a polarized society. What we have found is that authoritarianism is not an ideological position. It's a way to control, to maintain,
For power.
To manage the power. And it can
Power and greed.
Yes, and it kept happening on the left, in the middle, on the right. There is a trend, and this trend is growing. We can see this trend is growing. We see it in all Latin America, but also we can see, nobody wants to say that, but I have to say, in the States. Do you know that I was smiling when you were talking? And perhaps some of you look at me and I was smiling because I left my country to go to the States, to stay for a while quiet. So as many journalists, Venezuelan journalists, many Nicaraguan journalists, very Latin America journalists, African journalists, they look to the state, as a refugee. And now they are afraid about the situation there. So what I want to say is that there is a reality. We have to manage the reality. We can hide the situation, but also we can find the different path that we can follow in order to do this kind of journalism in which we lead, but also bring it together, the experiences, the different experiences, and learn each other, because the authoritarian, the dictators, they learn each other from each other. Mm-hmm. So we have a lot of experiences doing the journalism against this kind of regime, and we have a lot of things to share also.
How important is solidarity, Jose Carlos? I have heard the word solidarity in several sessions. How do you understand, how have you lived solidarity in the case of Chepe Zamora?
I think solidarity is key. I think, just like Luz Meli was saying, there's these people, like the authoritarians, learn from each other. They use the same handbook. So from one side, like from our side, we also need to create our own handbook to resist, right? part of that handbook is about solidarity and building networks and continue to tell the stories that these people want to silence. Because at the end of the day, that is exactly what they want. They think if we put this journalist in prison, everybody will be scared and everybody will be silenced. And I think that's where solidarity comes in, because it's about not allowing silence to fill in this space. It's about continuing to tell these stories and ensuring people, the citizens, understand what is happening.
Laura, what is your experience with solidarity?
Everything for me was solidarity. I think that my story shows how digital violence and censorship threaten journalism in Latin America, but also how when our voices are raising and be united, we can save us. And that's all.
And you?
The only way that I am sitting here today is because the people who are supporting me. And I always say thank you, because when I began to be persecuted in my country, I spent 5 years, going and get out, going and get out. That's the reason that I think I understand what is happening with you. And there are so many people that support me, and I always say thank you, for example, to the two Felipes. They know who are they, because they support me, and they made me feel that I am not alone. But I always want to say, always say thank you to journalists who are on the ground, who are in Venezuela, doing the best journalism that they can do. Because, when we see each other, we say, okay, there is a reason that why I am working, why I'm still doing what I am doing. So I think that solidarity is a beautiful word in Spanish, in English. I think in Poland, in Polaco también.
Against solitude.
Yes, against solitude, because we had to create a community that all the journalists, women journalists, trans journalists, LGBT journalists, all journalists can feel together, can feel with company.
Each year we organize the Gabo Award and the Gabo Festival. This year will be in Bogota from the 25 to 27 July. And we always receive a lot of great journalism in countries that are more normal or more tranquil, but also a great journalism of countries with such problems as we have heard here about the cases of Venezuela, Guatemala, and my country, Colombia. But I have to acknowledge that the case of Nicaragua is amazing. A country that fought for a revolution against dictatorship, and today are again under dictatorship by those that were part of the leadership of that revolution. I ask Carlos Fernando Chamorro to say some words, please, and to share the case of Nicaragua, if possible. Thanks, Carlos Fernando. It's a special occasion. You have been in other, please, you are very welcomed.
Thank you, Jaime, and all the colleagues at the panel. I'll be very brief, and I'll try to tell the two sides of the story. On the one hand, there's a story of repression, criminalization of journalism, not only the exercise of journalism, but also freedom of expression in Nicaragua for the last 7 years under a police state imposed by a family dictatorship that has gone beyond repression to impose a totalitarian dictatorship, eliminating not only free elections, freedom of reunion, mobilization, freedom of religion, but also eliminating civil society. More than 5,000 associations and non-governmental organizations, private universities, and others have been canceled and confiscated. In the media, there are 3 media outlets that have been assaulted by the police and confiscated. Confidencial, the one that I direct, La Prensa, and 100% Noticias. Several colleagues have been in prison for long periods. At this moment, there are 3 journalists in prison in Nicaragua. Some other 50 media outlets have been canceled, including several of the radio stations and small TV stations from the Catholic Church. And there are about more than 230 workers and people related with the media, including TV people, editors, directors, and more than 170 reporters in exile.
Carlos Fernando, you are part of a global network of exile newsrooms. And do you think that is part of the future of the exile journalists? I don't know. What do you?
I really can't extrapolate the situation of Nicaragua to other countries, but we share a lot of common things with our colleagues from Cuba and also some media in Venezuela, and Confidencial is also part of a small network, actually it's called NIMO, Network of Exile Media Outlets, in which we share experiences and best practices with colleagues from Russia, from Azerbaijan, from Iran, and Myanmar, and we are representatives of Latin America. So that is the other part of the story, media in exile, and it's the story of resistance, the story of breaking silence, the story of defeating censorship every day. There are about 15 to 20 Nicaraguan media outlets in exile working from Costa Rica, from US, and from Spain under very difficult conditions, because exile is not something easy, and even worse when it becomes a permanent condition and no longer an emergency situation. And
the funding has been lost recently.
Yes.
Part of the funding.
Well, the sustainability of media in exile is a major challenge.
Yes.
Another challenge is how to protect sources when our sources are criminalized in Nicaragua, and how to break great stories even under those circumstances. So just one last word.
Yes.
When people ask me, what can we do for Nicaragua? Well, keep Nicaragua in the radar, keep the visibility of this story of the media in exile defeating censorship, and try to report, try to break the barriers and report in Nicaragua. Don't go and say, I'm the representative of that media, because they will never allow you to go there. But there have been 3 cases in the last 2 years. A guy from TV Azteca from Mexico, Eider Peralta from NPR, and Prue Lewarne, Australian TV woman journalist. The 3 of them were incognito in Nicaragua, underground, and they did great stories to tell that story of resistance.
Thank you, Carlos Fernando. We have 5 minutes to share. If there are questions, please. A question there. We have one, and the 2 questions, please. Do you have a microphone? Mic there? Please. O que alguien lo lleve. Excuse me. Gracias.
Hi, thank you so much to the panel for this presentation. Thank you, Jaime, for moderating it. I am a founder and editor from Paraguay in South America, and I guess I have a reflection and also a question. My problem with thinking about media in exile, I think, well, it's not a choice really, but my fear is that there won't be countries left at some point to go into exile because we are seeing a wave of censorship and repression in so many countries now. Right, my country last year, they passed a foreign agent law, and the same thing happened in Peru. I know that in Venezuela there have been discussions about that. So my question is, how do we approach this? Because they are pretty much at every front. Legal fronts, they are attacking us online, they're attacking our information ecosystem, they're attacking us in our houses, they are taking over power, they're now in government, so they're taking over the platforms that we used to use to publish our information. So how do we approach that if it's not, and I think if it's not a cross-sector answer, there won't be,
Okay.
yeah.
Thank you. Second question, please be thinking of that, but answer, and why don't do you want to say something? No, it's okay. Or do we have time for the question? Yes.
Hi, my question is for Laura. The thing is that I'm from Colombia, and I went to Barranquilla several times, and I know the Char family is quite beloved there. They really love these people. And I want to know what it was the motive. What do you see in Barranquilla to stand? Because this talk is about stand up against the power, against the thing. What do you see? What was the real motive to do this? Because for me and Colombia, I know the big thing that you did. So I want to know more what was the kind of the core of the motive to do this book, to do a lot of things that you did in Colombia.
Without buying the book. Okay. And the last one, and then a final round of answers.
So I'm also Colombian, and at the end of the day, I think as a student, we also ask ourselves if there anything to come back to. Because I'm one of those who went away, and I've studied here in Europe, in Spain. And yes, what can we do? Do we go back to something at this point in Latin America as journalists?
Okay, please.
Jasmine, how are you doing? And I think that the trend is growing. It's going to grow. I think we had to deal with this, but I also believe that the oppressor, the people who is against us, they don't want you to be far. They want you that you be in silent. So a way to resistance is continue doing our job. I know this is very difficult. I know a lot of things, but you know the pleasure that you feel when you don't keep quiet. You take care about you, but you continue doing what you do, because you know how expensive it is lose a journalist who decide to quit the profession. It costs to the society, costs to everybody. So if we try to maintain journalists inside or overseas together, doing different alliances, or looking for information and sharing information, and look for this family that I didn't know, that family, famous family in Barranquilla, say, you know, spread light about that. I think that we can do what we want to do in the best way that we can do in the context.
Laura, short, because
my motivation, no, it's short. Well, I am a journalist who deeply believes in her duty of tell stories, and I couldn't be in silence what that happens to me. So I say that.
Jose Carlos, please close this session with your final reflection on the...
First, thank you, Jaime, Luzmeli, and Laura, for everything. Thank you to everyone for being here at this late afternoon session. I think it's been a very powerful conversation. I think the one thing that we see is that there's something that is happening everywhere in the world, and that it's really important to continue doing the job. It's very important to continue doing journalism, to continue to resist and defend that space, to ensure that the public is well informed and I also think like this, we couldn't be in a better theater than El Teatro Sapiencia with all of these wise
We will
colleagues.
see. Standing up without normalizing.
Yeah.
But we have to resist and to stand up. But things are not easier in the times to come. So, and we have to make people open their eyes, because part of the problem is the disconnection of the people, the citizens, with journalists. And part of the strategy is saying journalists are liars, they belong to, they have, but this is the handbook, as you said, so let's go on. Thank you very much.